My sister had left a voicemail saying she'd be out of touch for a period. She'd had an opportunity to go off to Africa to save babies or something. She had to leave instantly, and she couldn't give me any details because she didn't know them, and also because she suspected that covert entry into an unnamed but nasty African nation was going to be part of the picture. Then I went over to Lottie's gallery and told her I had to be out of town for maybe 3 months, and why, and she bitched a little about it, but the money dangling there, maybe $200,000, was an argument she couldn't really get past. I was real formal, not like last time, just a business relationship now, and she said, "Hey, did you see you got a review?" In the main room of the gallery, my actresses, except Kate, were still up there, with the sacred red dots that said they'd sold, and there was a review from the Village Voice, framed and hanging nearby. It wasn't bad. The guy actually had got it that it wasn't just a postmodernist appropriation, but a genuine effort to use the traditional means of painting to penetrate character, to pry up under the mask of celebrity, and he hoped I'd continue to do work in that vein. Unfortunately, he closed with a little riff about how Andy Warhol had started as a commercial artist, and look where he'd gone. Yeah, look. I said, "Very nice. It's always a treat to be lumped with Warhol." Lottie said, "Don't be ridiculous. It's a great review. I've had calls from some very big collectors. Do you have any more work to show? This could be a very good thing for you." I looked at her, and I was about to say something cynical and nasty, which is what I usually did in these situations, but I saw she was really pleased. Her face was positively shining with happiness and admiration. So I just nodded, and after an awkward moment of suspension, hugged her, and she hugged me back. Then I said, "Well, good, but they're going to have to wait," meaning I had to do the Italian job first, and she was fine with that, and was glad I was at least out of the magazine business for a while. I told her about some ideas I'd had for paintings, and my God, it was nice to talk with Lottie again about painting and real work, just like we were back at the start, and I left her with the hope that my work had turned a corner. I went home, dreading the solitude that might require me to actually paint something. But as it happened, as I climbed the stairs to my loft, I saw that the door to Bosco's loft was open, and when I looked in I found my neighbor examining himself in the dusty mirror that hangs next to the door. He was wearing an antique tuxedo jacket over jeans and a black 9-inch Nails tour T-shirt, and I remembered his show and that I had promised to walk over to it with him. Although Bosco has a perfectly serviceable wife and children, plus an agent, plus a gallery, he likes to have me or some other artist hang out with him when he goes to one of his openings. It's a tradition I'd always supported with my usual masochism, so we went out and made the short walk up Broadway to Broome. The gallery is west of Broadway, and by the time we got to the corner we could see something was up. There were 2 police cars parked with their lights flashing at the junction of the 2 streets, blocking traffic, and when we turned the corner we saw that Broome Street was jammed with people. I guessed at least 500 of them, and maybe 20 cops. A couple of TV vans rumbled and hummed near the gallery entrance and lit it with their glare. "Man, what a crowd," said Bosco. "And television. This is great." He was grinning. His teeth went red, then yellow, as they alternately glowed in the cop light and the overhead crime lights. He said, "Hey, let's get in there before all the champagne's gone," and strode off toward the crowd. Or the mob, as I ought to call it. Even at half a block away I could tell that it wasn't a crowd of art lovers. I heard the sound of glass breaking and a scream, and then distant sirens. Behind me a large black van appeared from Broadway, halted near the patrol cars, and disgorged a squad of tactical police in black uniforms with helmets, face shields, and long batons. They started to form a line, and I spun on my heel and ran away. Then I went calmly to a Chinese restaurant and ordered some takeout. Shameful, yes, but what could I have done? When I got back to my place, I sat down with my lo mein and turned on the TV. There was a woman anchoring the local news with the grave look and lowered voice suitable for portentous matters, and she was talking to someone off-screen. It was a breaking news moment, and then the scene flashed to a guy with a microphone who was standing not far from where I'd last seen Bosco. Behind him you could see what remained of the gallery, its window smashed, its blackened, smoking interior, and firemen walking through the ruins doing their usual after-fire cleanup. The reporter was saying, "No, Karen, we don't know the condition yet of the artist, Dennis Bosco, but witnesses say he was badly beaten and taken to St. Vincent's Hospital. We'll get back to you as soon as we have any more information." Some more questioning back and forth about injuries and arrests, and then they showed some footage of Bosco's 9/11 piece and a tape taken earlier at the gallery, the stuff I'd seen the start of in real life. Bosco walking into the crowd around the front of the gallery and then being recognized and getting shoved and screamed at by a group of big guys and then going down in a flurry of kicks and blows, and the cops shoving through to rescue him, not very enthusiastically, I thought, and then a trash can going through the window, and then the mob pushing through into the gallery and screaming art lovers streaming out and getting their lumps too, some of them, and then there was a blaze of fire that made the video go white, and there were shouts and screams. The final shot was the tactical police finally moving in like Imperial stormtroopers and clearing the street. I couldn't stop watching, even through the talking heads and the stupid street interviews, some of which had to have the obscenities bleeped out. Then later there was video of Bosco, his face a pudding of blood, on a gurney being loaded onto an ambulance, from which they cut to more interviews, every one of whom agreed that it was obscene to make fun of 9/11, and especially to use the actual ashes of that day, and that the artist had gotten what he deserved. There was a spokesman from the mayor's office who said the usual about free speech and our constitutional values and that the culprits would be prosecuted, but he didn't sound too enthusiastic about it either. And why should he be, since the affray was clearly the doing of off-duty cops and firemen? The whole thing was a work of art. I tried to call Connie Bosco in Jersey, but the line was busy. Then I called St. Vincent's and found that Bosco was in surgery, and they were only giving information out to family members. So I went to sleep. I visited the hospital the next day, but they wouldn't let me in to see him. The floor was guarded by 3 big cops, 2 at the nurses' station and 1 by Bosco's room, so I had to use my charm on one of the nurses. She agreed to take a message into Connie, and after a while Connie came out and told me I could go back in with her. From what I overheard of the police conversation, I gathered that they resented having to guard him and would have liked to add some lumps of their own. Ironic postmodernism has obviously not penetrated the consciousness of the police. Connie Bosco is from Mexico and is a potter of some distinction. She seemed distraught and confused by what had happened to her husband. She understood getting your ass kicked by the cops. That's what the cops did in her native land, but she didn't get the part about them doing it for art rather than money. Bosco, however, got it just fine. He was as happy as a man with internal injuries, 3 busted ribs, and a smashed face could be. It hurt him to grin, he said, but he grinned all the same. This was what he'd wanted all his life, to get a rise out of society with his art. He'd tried pornography, he'd tried absurdity, ho-hum, but he'd finally located a sacred cow in the ashes of 9/11, and at last he was one with Monet, Van Gogh, and Marcel Duchamp. A urinal moment, and to be savored. "Apparently the thing's gone," I said. "You heard there was a fire?" "It doesn't matter," he said. "The memory will live on. Besides, I have a lot more ashes. I could build it again. Maybe I will." "You do, and I'll kill you myself," said his wife. I left Bosco and took a sharp left onto 11th Street and into a sour depression. Okay, he'd found one of the last few sore spots in the culture and stuck his blade in there pretty good, and paid the price. He'd literally suffered for art, which was supposed to be part of the deal. But it wasn't a deal I was ever interested in. What I wanted was... It struck me that I didn't know. That was strange. In the what I really want section of my brain, there was a dusty shelf with nothing on it. Instead, there was a longing. Thinking this shit and walking down the Via Negativa this way, I found myself in Gorman's, where I drank away the evening under my silly painting of Hillary. I fell into conversation with a fellow who said he was an unemployed philosophy teacher, and we talked about the nature of reality through a serious number of rounds and then staggered out into the glowing dark of the city. He needed a cab and said he'd drop me off at my place, and he hailed one, and Actually, I can't recall the tail end of the occasion very well. I remember Wittgenstein, and the world is whatever is the case, and the cab, but I don't have any memory of getting out of the cab and walking up my stairs, which has often served to burn a lot of alcohol out of my system. I do remember waking up. I wasn't in my bed, but in a king-sized item with sheets far finer and cleaner than mine, looking up at a ceiling higher and cleaner than the one in my loft. I had a brief and ridiculous thought that I'd been seduced by the unemployed philosopher. I called out, "Nothing," whereupon I rose carefully so as not to move the spiked thing in my skull and cast around for the bathroom. Someone had spent a lot of money here, all the latest European fixtures and a huge glassed-in shower enclosure, quite a gap between it and my old tin job up on stilts with its mildewed curtain. I washed my face and opened the medicine cabinet, looking for aspirin. I found a bottle of Advil, took 3, and checked out the rest of the stuff there. The usual, and I learned from the high-end makeup and face treatments that a woman also lived in this place. But when I examined the amber drug vials, I got a shock. One of them was for amoxicillin, and the name on the label was mine.